I mean, actually, I'm skipping a big piece of my educational uh, history out, which I shouldn't because it's very kind of. So before I went to the alternative school, my parents pulled me out of public school and my little brother because they hated the public school system. And they were like, well, we're going to put you with this tutor. And this woman, her name was Janet Abbey, and she was like a Summerhill person. She was really into the Summerhill philosophy of education. And so she would like do this thing where we would go to her house and she'd say, okay, what would you guys like to learn today? And we'd be like, oh, what do you mean? You're the teacher, and she's like, well, think about it, and we're like, me and my brother were looking at each other like, we're going to be able to do whatever we want to do. This is cool. And I remember just like taking records over there and just listening to records all day and stuff like that. And then after a while, I was getting a little antsy and bored. And then it was like, well, what do I want to do? And I was like, oh, I know what I want to do. Because at the time, macrame was really big. Do you remember? I was like, I want to learn how to do macrame. And she's like, oh, that's great. Well, how are you going to do that? And I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, you're the teacher. Like, so before you know it, I'm going to the library, getting a book out on macrame. And then we're going to the bead store and the string store. And before you know it, I'm making these little macrame, this and that. And then it grows into like big wall hangings and like purses and whatever. But the whole year I was with her, it was basically about, self-motivation, knowing that you can teach yourself, and really her kind of shaping that, planting the seed that I could do anything I wanted to do. We could do anything we wanted to do, and we could teach ourselves, basically. And so when I went to the free school, all the other kids are like smoking weed and getting high and like, they were like whatever. And I was just like, I want to do music, So by the time I got all my credits, and I visited Boston because Gary Goldschneider told me that there was like really good teachers and schools. I went to visit Berkeley and I went to New England Conservatory, and I really decided I didn't want to learn jazz in a college environment. So I'm not exactly sure, I met Madame Chaloff, whose son was Serge Chaloff, and I ended up her place, and she's like, oh, you must move here. You can study with me. And then she got me Charlie Banakis, who is a very famous jazz pedagogist, who really did teach me pretty much how to, start to play on changes, like really getting that under my belt. And so I had 2 private teachers, and then I was like working as a janitress at Harvard University, cleaning, that place, and then as a waitress and and I had a couple of roommates. It was a crazy time, but I did manage to live there for about a year and a half and study and get a lot under my belt.
Because you have a lot of people that you study with. Mary
Yes.
Williams for a minute, and Susan
Right.
Starr.
That was afterwards. Susan Starr, right after. Yes. Kenny Barron I never studied with formally. He was just a friend.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but I mean, he's definitely, I think of him as a mentor, but he hates me to say that I think of him as a mentor, but he's definitely someone I look up to.
Yeah, tell me about his, since you think of him as a mentor, why?
Well, I mean,
Kenny Barron.
What was that, my relationship with Kenny Barron?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because what happened was when I first moved to New York City, I ended up not right away, because maybe after a few years, I ended up moving to his neighborhood without knowing that he lived there. And, before then I was just a fan. I'd go hear him play and I introduced myself to him. So he kind of knew me, but not really. And then, maybe he did know of me as a pianist, a young pianist. And but then when I moved to his neighborhood, I bumped into him at the subway station, and I was like, Kenny, what are you doing here? And he's looking at me. He's like, no, excuse me, what are you doing here? He says, I've been living here for 30 years. Like, what are you doing in my neighborhood? And I was like, really? And so he ended up living right around the corner from me. So then it was friendly. I'd bump into him all the time, whatever. And I used to listen to his music all the time. I used to go hear him a lot. I was a real fan. And then when he heard me play, he really liked my playing, and he actually took me into. He started his own label, and I was one of the first people to record on his label. He produced a record for me called Secret Places. I don't know if you. Kenny produced that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He and Joanne Klein, who was his business partner.
Now, when you moved to New York, did you have a gig up there, or were you gigging, or how were you?
By the time I moved to New York, yeah, I moved up there because I just wanted to live there to hang out and play.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, I didn't have a particular gig, but I was starting to work.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
So what was your first professional gig that you remember getting paid for?
Oh, it was in Philadelphia, here, Philadelphia.
Philly or wherever. Where? It was
Yeah, it was at, well, actually, I don't know if it was the first, because I was working, doing little things, but the first sort of debut concert was at, it's kind of weird because
The Roots Festival? Philly Roots?
No, it was, what is that theater down at the University of Pennsylvania?
Oh, Annenberg.
Annenberg. It was at Annenberg. And that was kind of like my debut concert for my trio. And I remember because it was with Newman Baker on drums and Jamaluddin Takuma before his name was Jamaluddin. So his name at the time was Rudy McDaniels. And I remember I had like done this little poster because I used to draw. You know, I was like, I almost went into art instead of music. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing their names on that. And I played that. That was one of my first sort of debut concerts with my own trio, and I played all my own music. Yeah. Right, we are jumping around a bit, but I think that concert at Annenberg was before. No, it had to be after. It had to be after I came back. So maybe I was about 18.
Yeah, because you did the Philly Roots
17,
Jazz
18.
Festival in 1975.
Okay, so that is...
And you were 18, according to...
Yeah, and where was that, the Philly Roots Jazz Festival?
75.
But where was it? Do you know the venue?
I think it might have been Annenberg.
Oh, maybe that's what it was then.
Yeah,
It could have been that festival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was Rufus Reed with you?
Okay, so I was a little older than I was saying. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it wasn't with Rufus. It was with Jamaluddin Takuma and Newman Baker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how much were you paid? Do you remember?
Oh, God. I don't remember. That's so funny. What a funny question.
I like to find out what the going rate was at certain times.
Oh, yeah, that would be a really interesting thing to know. I don't remember.
Did you have to sign a contract?
I'm pretty sure I did. In fact, I had my first radio interview. And I remember I had my first radio interview because after I listened to it, I was so appalled at my public speaking because I kept saying so much.
Was it at WRTI?
Yes. No, it was one of the university. It was
XPN.
It was XPN.
Okay.
And I remember just saying so much I was mortified.
All right. Now you at this time you moved from Philly to New York like late 70s? Like 70s?
Yes, it was after college.
Okay.
So I had this little weird trajectory because I left Philadelphia and I went to Boston, and from Boston I went to Detroit.
Right.
And then after Detroit I came back here. And then I was sort of a little bit back and forth between. I had a boyfriend who lived in Detroit, and he was actually a very major person in my life. And let me stay on course. Yeah, so I was in Detroit for a little while. He came back with me, and then during that time when I came back, I was still pretty young. It was before I went to college. And I studied with Bernard Pfeiffer.
Right.
And I had Stanley Cowell later. I studied with Stanley. I was studying with Dennis Sandole. And
Where was his studio, Sandole's?
South Philadelphia.
Do you remember the address?
Oh, God. He stayed in the same place for a really long time.
I know. I asked Bobby Zankel.
Bobby would know. He was one of his longest time students.
All right,
yeah.
But in South Philly where you were.
Yeah, South Philly.
Okay. How long did you study with?
I don't know why I want to say Reed Street or somewhere around there, but I could be totally wrong. How long did I stay with Dennis?
Yeah.
About 3 years.
Now, what was
Maybe off and on for something. Maybe, I'm trying to remember if it was even 3 years. It may have been less.
So what was he like as a teacher?
Well, he was brilliant on one hand. Brilliant in the sense that, he was very well organized as a teacher. So during the month, we would have one course class on rhythm, one class on like lines and melodic structures, another class on, say during the month. So he would rotate, like 1 week you'd go in, it would be rhythm. 1 week you'd go in, it would be lines. 1 week you'd go in, throughout the month, it would be maybe just harmony or ear training or whatever. And he also worked in a lot of other theory that was non-diatonic as well as non-20th century orientated. So he would be doing like world music, like scales from all over the world or different rhythms, and he had a different way of doing things. And initially I didn't understand what he was doing, and I felt like I didn't trust him. Like I just felt like, what is this? I was just like, what? Because sometimes he would do stuff like he would be I still have my notebooks. I got to find those for you for the thing, because I have a couple of Sandole notebooks where you could really see what we were doing. And sometimes he would draw some changes, write out some changes, and then he would just put scattered notes throughout. He would write out the bars and then might put like a note there and like dabble there and down here, and then he would tell you to make a composition and incorporate that into the composition. And I'd be like, what? Huh? I was like, huh? And then he would not only want you to do that, but then you'd have to write it, learn it, and then you'd have to take it through all the keys. So he would have you kind of develop your own language and then become where you're like a master of it as you're working on it and through it. So a master of it in the sense of, oh, I wrote that and I can play it in all the keys. So you had to practice hard to be a student. You know what I mean? Like, because otherwise you just come in there half-assing or half-stepping. I mean, it was very specific work you had to do. And most of it was ear training around the ear. But then rhythmically, too, he was interesting because he would always be doing something with rhythm a little different. And then also, a lot of composition. He worked with everybody differently, too. He didn't teach everybody the same. So, and I think he had a kind of ability, maybe a second sense on how to work with each individual. So that was one of his gifts as a teacher. I think he was able to kind of key into people and kind of pull stuff out of them, and he wouldn't do it the same way from person to person. So it was very kind of like musical alchemy, kind of strange and mysterious, and you're never able to pretty much completely put your finger on it. But people like, Pat Martino, James Moody. I remember James Moody saying anytime he came into Philadelphia, he would go by Sandole's and say, hey man, give me one of them things. Like it would be like a thing he would have to work on and write and then take through all the keys.
How much did the lessons cost?
Oh God, maybe $20, $15, 20. I don't even really remember. I'm just talking off the top of my head. Something like that.
Now you went to school at the University of the Arts?
Later, yes.
Yeah. What years did you go there?
I think it was. So it has to be like, late 70s, early 80s.
Okay, and you studied with Susan Starr there?
I did.
Now, why did you take classical lessons? Was it something you felt you had to balance the jazz out, or?
No. I always was I was always studying classical music.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when I played at when I started Settlement Music School, all my teachers were mostly classical, and I also wanted to maintain a certain, Bernard, his stuff was super, like,
tell me about Bernard.
Well, so when did I study with Bernard? That was like before college. So I had to be like 17, 18 with Bernard. Yeah, because Billy McCoy was my boyfriend that I met in Detroit. He was a pianist and composer. He was a little older than me, but he was very knowledgeable. To the point when we moved to Philadelphia, he knew about Bernard. He's like, we got to stay with Bernard. And I didn't even know who Bernard was. And so it was because of my boyfriend, Billy, who said, let's study with Bernard. And then I found out who he was, and of course he's an extraordinary musician, and not just, he was he was really in a class by himself, in terms of what he did, how he approached music, and how he approached his own music, how he approached the piano, because he was a true virtuoso. He was a real virtuoso player.
Now, was that near the end of his life that you were saying?
Yeah, towards the end of his life, yeah. Because when he died, I wasn't his student at that time, but it wasn't that long after. Actually, I'm curious now what year it was that he died, because I'm trying to remember. But he had a really profound effect on me in the sense that he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I remember at one time, at one of my lessons, he was like kind of scolding me, and he was sort of like, because I don't think he thought I was taking myself seriously enough, which I wasn't. And he was saying like, you have to remember that you're competing with Keith Jarrett and he named like all the Herbie Hancock, all the top pianist artists of the day. And these are the people that you have to be just as good as them. Oscar Peterson, blah, 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 like that's what you're aiming for. And I remember like sort of turning around, looking over my shoulder. It's like, is he talking to me? You know what I mean? But if there was a way that he saw me, in a way that he respected me as his student, and also an expectation he had of me to like kind of like pull, raise the bar, so to speak, and so that was really good for me. I mean, he was not the most organized teacher, like as compared to someone like Sandole, who always had his work ready and you knew exactly what you're going to do from like Bernard was not like that. You'd go and it'd be like, you don't know what to expect. It could be anything. He could be listening. I remember one time I went over there, he was listening to Eberhard Weber record, and he really loved the writing and he wanted me to listen to it. So we listened to it together and he played the record for me. And I think it was called The Colors of Chloe. That was the name of, I don't know why I remember that. It's so strange what you remember, what you don't. Then I also remember him just playing for me, just sitting there, just watching and listening to him play and just being like just blown away, I didn't know the piano could even be, it would be like you'd be looking at, I think Don Gladden is doing a thing on Bernard. I think he's doing a film on Bernard. And I remember talking to Don and I was just thinking, because Don was his student also. And it would be like, you'd be sitting there and you'd be like, what is that? Like, what is he doing? Like, what is that? Because you never heard anybody play like that or approach the piano. He had his own way and he didn't care. He set his own bar. He played to his own muse. And it was like later for all those people who let them try to catch up with me. Like, like I'm doing my thing. This is what I do. And he really truly did set his own bar. And it was really incredible. I think a lot of people, even in the jazz scene, maybe didn't quite get everything that he was doing. I know Keith Jarrett wanted to study with him. I met Keith Jarrett once through Bernard. We went to go hear him play. Bernard and he took a couple of his students and we went to hear Keith Jarrett at it used to be the old Showboat. Yeah. What was that? But at the time they were calling it something else. Maybe it was the Bijou at that time. So, yeah.